this was an amazing conversation with Dr. Jillian Lampert. She encouraged me and gave me so much wisdom and so much information about eating disorders and those who are struggling with eating disorders. I feel like I learned a lot from this episode. So she talks to us about some things that we can do to inform ourselves. Firstly, think about what we were saying, how we are talking about food, how we are expressing ourselves about food, about our body, what we are saying to the people around us, and how we're presenting ourselves. You're going to hear about that in this episode. She also talks about modeling, which hands just plays right into that. She talks about genetics and high noticing. And that's something that you're going to want to listen to discover what she means about that. It's along the lines of hypervigilance, and she has some really great encouragement about that. And the one thing that impacted me so deeply, the founder of the Emily program, he created this foundation, this website, Emily program, and this is where this organization wants people to know that they can have peace with their body image, with their eating. They can find peace in the world as it relates to their bodies. And he founded this Emily program. And his sister, her name is Emily, and she had an eating disorder, and she moved into healing and restoration from what was happening in her life. And Dr. Jillian said, there's one thing that the founder said that is sort of their mission statement. And it's this: do what you want, but be able to explain it to a community of your peers. And that really impacted me, because the call to action there is to say, do what you want, but if you can explain it to a community of your peers, then you will be able to justify yourself for doing it. So when you are thinking about your relationship with food and how you are expressing yourself, what you're saying about it, what you're saying to yourself, what you're saying to other people, your children, your young teenagers, do what you want, but be able to explain it to a community of your peers, that what you are saying is explainable. How you're interacting with the food, with your emotion around food, with emotion around what's happening in your life, be able to explain it. And if you can, then you can move forward. And so that was a really cool thing for me. And she also said, and the last and final piece was, a lot of eating disorders are unseen. We don't see them. We think of eating disorders as really, really thin. But she's saying only 6% are underweight. The other 94% are people that you don't know. You can't really see it. And so that is something to be more aware about. And it is the reason why I do what I do. And I love this conversation. She and I, man, we hit it off. And I am thrilled to let you in on this amazing conversation with Dr. Jillian Lampert. She is a doctor who works with Emily program and those who are struggling with eating disorders. This is a conversation you're not going to want to miss. So here it is, Dr. Jillian. How do you, how did you start? How did you start? Because this is just beautiful. I love the way this just flows off of you. Curious and yet respectful, and you want to mind things with people, and that's really commendable. So, you're a doctor. What did you do? Can you share with us?
Yeah, well, I so appreciate that. It is absolutely my passion. I love helping people understand more about eating disorders, because these are terrible illnesses to have that people can recover from. Like, that's the bottom line. People can die or they can get better.
Yep.
And places in between, and
Yep.
everybody should be able to get better.
Yep.
I'm really grateful I was able to get better and
Okay.
didn't die from my illness. So, but that, you know, when I had an eating disorder in high school and in college, but I didn't even know there was a career in eating disorders. I had an eating disorder at the time when one of the most impactful things somebody said to me at that time was when my doctor, who I'm sure was very well meaning,
Mm.
said, "When are you going to be done with this?" Like it was a subscription I could turn off. And I felt so alone. I
Oh.
felt so unseen, so misunderstood. I knew I had an illness somehow in me, in my little 15-year-old brain. Like I knew something was wrong with me and I knew it wasn't my fault. And then this guy who had taken care of me for years as my doctor was telling me that I needed to just stop doing it, and it didn't make sense to me. And so I think part of that sort of fueled my recovery over the next 7 years, and through lots of amazing people that were helpful to me
Mm.
in a time when there was very little eating disorder treatment.
Yeah.
So I felt super alone and judged and all of those things. And then I went to college. It was going to be I always had planned to be a pediatrician, and that's what I was going to do. And then in my sophomore year of college, I called my parents and said, "I'm not going to go to medical school to be a pediatrician." And they said, "Sure you are." And I said, "No, I'm not." And they said, "What are you going to do? You've been wanting to do that since you were 6." And I said, "I know. I think I want to go into nutrition and get a PhD in nutrition." And they're like, "What's that?" Like, what does that do? "No, you just think that because you have an eating disorder." And I said, "No, I really have found this thing that really electrifies my imagination, that food and nutrition, like food can be different. Food can be helpful. It can
Yeah.
be a world of amazing things in our body." And so I did that and went on to get 2 master's degree and a PhD and a fellowship and all kinds of things. Also have a persistence trait, which many people with eating disorders do, and I just keep going.
Right.
Uh, and I fell into this first job of mine where I had just trained at a university program that had a small eating disorder program, one of the first in the country. And I went to my first job, which was at a small community hospital in the middle of Vermont, tiny little state. And my
Yeah.
boss at the time said, "What do you know about eating disorders?" And I was so afraid because I thought she somehow knew that I had had an eating disorder and was going to do something about it. And then I took a deep breath and thought, doesn't matter if she knows. I'm well trained. I am a qualified healthcare provider. And I said, I have some training. Why? And she said, "The community wants us to build an eating disorder program, and you are one of the most experienced people here. Go upstairs and meet with these 3 people and start a program." And I was, 25 years old. And I thought, okay. And so I did. I went upstairs and I said to these people, like, "Here's who I am and this is what I know." And I know this little bit. And they said, "Well, I know this little bit." And somebody else said, "I know this little bit." And together we built a program. And so we ran this program for a number of years before I had to go back to get some more degrees. And I kept finding myself in an opportunity to work with people with eating disorders that I thought, well, this is just my place. That very first time I stepped on an eating disorder unit at that hospital program I trained at, everyone else was afraid of the clients and didn't want to be in the unit. And I was like, well, these are my people. I
Yes.
know, I know how this feels. I know this anxiety in the air can be different. And so it's sort of captivated my imagination ever since then. And I've been so fortunate in finding people all along the way that have been wanting to build more and more knowledge and care and access and understanding for people with these illnesses and their families. That it's an incredible thing I get to do. I'm so grateful for it.
Oh, I love that. You know, your experience is the thing that, in so many ways, is, we often say experience can open doors for other people, experience can heal other people. And I think that that is an incredible, you are an example of that because you know what it's like to live in the body of someone who is struggling. And so you can provide something here that someone else that has never experienced that, it's very different, right? They're coming from a different place. And we all find ourselves in that place, but there's something beautiful about offering that experience. And it's this, it rolls off of you. I've got to say, it's just like, wow, yes, you are living out You're treating someone the way you wished you could have been treated. You're giving them something in the way that you wished could have cut 5 years off. You're giving people what you didn't have. And when you operate out of that place, that is a place of complete power. And I was doing my research, and my research says, just about 29 million Americans will suffer from an eating disorder in their lifetime.
That's right.
And I'm just like, what is wrong? What is wrong? Dr. Jillian, tell us what is wrong.
There's so many things that are wrong. So
I
many. Where do we start? Well, it's, and I would say the 29 million is probably an underestimate. So that's something to think about. It's probably larger than 29 million. But I think that, the things we think a lot about are what leads to an eating disorder. And a lot of times people think, oh, it must be this thing or that one thing. And it's never really one thing. It's a confluence of things. So I think we need to talk about the genetics. We need to talk about social media and culture. And we need to talk about temperament, which is really kind of like talking about genetics. And then we need to talk about experience. And so those all sort of go together. And for some people lead to an eating disorder. So we should unpack that.
Yes, we really should. I'm picking on social media first because it's irritating to me.
Yes.
I'm a mother, I'm an auntie, I'm a friend of many, and I see it myself on the gram, right? And it's something that I watch and I look, and the restrictive eating, or just even when someone tries on an outfit and they pull back and they show their abdomen or whatever they're going to show. And then it leaves you with this feeling of, now that I have this awareness, it's like, well, what if someone is struggling with body image and they see that and now they think to themselves, I don't look like that.
Yeah. Well, and actually, don't most people end up thinking something like that?
I
Right?
go, oh my gosh, I'm bloated. I
Yeah.
can't, like, it's all of those things.
Yeah. It's all those things. And we forget that that person probably made like 15 videos and showed that one. We're like, oh my gosh, they just got dressed and they showed me their abdomen and they were perfect. And how come I can't be perfect? And we forget that they have lighting and probably clips that hold their outfit in a certain way. And they have all kinds of filters, and they did it 12 times before they showed us anything. And yet we think, oh, I'm not good enough.
That's a really good point.
It's
That's a
so
really
easy to forget.
We do, because I was posting a video just before you came of our conversation that's going to happen, and I did it 4 times
Right. Exactly.
because I stuttered over a word. I did something that I thought was weird, and there's this drive to perfection
Yeah.
because I got to get the lighting right, and I want to be authentic though, but I don't want to be too authentic.
Right. Tricky. Yep. Perfectly authentic. It's a new vibe.
It's a very new vibe. So, talk about this with us, because I want to learn from you. And I know my job here is to remind people that we all have responsibility in this. We are not, like, if you think, oh, I'm here, we're doing what I'm doing in my corner of the world. No. And when you're raising your daughters and your sons, you are looking at them and you are checking your body, you're pinching your things. They are watching. They're
Exactly.
watching.
They're watching. Yep. And that to take that further, right? When kids are little, they sort of think we're superheroes, right? I have a 20-year-old who's going to be 21 in a couple weeks, and I think maybe I'm still a little bit of a superhero, but on the good days. But when kids are 3 and 4 and 5, parents are just these amazing, can do no wrong, have all the answers, know all the things. And so if your child hears you saying negative things about your body, things about your eating, things about other people's bodies or appearance or what they're eating, they start to file that away. That's how they're just sponges, right? That soak it all up. And so why would we be surprised that they might then start to look at their bodies and their food and translate what they hear from us and society say about food and bodies to themselves. And I think it's so interesting. Parents have such a strong role in this, in terms of prevention, because if your child thinks you're a superhero, then you get to be a superhero and you can teach them how to love their body. And that means you get to not say anything out loud about your body and food that's negative. And that's tricky because our society teaches us that negative is the way to go with our bodies and our food. So it's something you have to practice, but that's probably the most impactful thing a parent can do is catch yourself before you say the thing. I have this funny story when my kiddo was like 5 and I was talking about something, I don't know, and I said something probably like out loud to myself. It wasn't about my body. It was, I don't know, about my whatever I was doing.
Yeah.
And I hear this voice from the living room say, Mom, say it in your head. And I thought, you know, that's so true. I should have just said that thing in my head. And in fact, when I say the things and, when we say those things about our bodies and about food that are negative and we say them in our heads, we also should follow them with, that's not very kind. And maybe
Mm.
that doesn't really matter. And maybe I don't really need to worry about that. And maybe I can find joy in life or whatever the next thought is that can help, with that negative thought we had. But that not saying it out loud is so impactful because then they hear you not saying negative things. And then if you're really brave, you can say positive things, right? Like, wow, I love how confident I feel in this outfit. I love how I feel when I'm eating this food. I love how I can sink into this sweater and it feels so warm and cozy. I love how comfortable these pants are and they don't bind on my waist. I love that I take care of my body. Like those sound different
That does.
than my waist is too like my tight, my waistband is too tight and I'm bloated and I'm, all the things that we might think, but we can frame those a different way.
I've done it.
We all
I've
have.
done it. I looked at my daughter, she's 15, the other day, and I put on a pair of pants. I was running out the door and I wanted to look good. And I said to her, I know I'm bloated, but am I that bloated that it's noticeable? And so then she immediately said, you're bloated and it's noticeable. I'm like, okay, next pair.
Right.
Okay, you know, did I do damage? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't
It's
know.
yeah. And
But
it's just one comment in this sea of things
yeah,
that
but
your
I
daughter will
feel,
hear. And
but
yeah,
as I'm doing the research, I feel like crap. I
yeah.
feel like crap that I actually said that. So, I mean, when you say so many of these beautiful, juicy things, I got to kind of come to a question with them so that you can help us because we're all learning from you. The question I would ask you is, okay, so if you're like me who checked myself, I didn't check myself, and I'm like, okay, I know I'm bloated, so that's the honesty, but am I that bloated? So now you got a problem. How do I undo that?
Mm. You could say, I mean, I'm thinking all these prevention things, but in that moment, you could say, oh, you know what? Bloating is normal. I'm going to go do what I'm going to do.
Sure.
Or, well, I might feel really bloated, but you know what? Nobody's really looking at me in that way. No one's going to notice. So I'm
Can
just going to
I
go about my day.
can I talk to her 2 weeks later and say, sweetheart, I was having a conversation with Dr. Jillian and this is what we've talked about. And here's what I learned.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You could absolutely talk about it later. You could talk about it and say, I was thinking about that. I think that's always a great thing for parents to use as a line like, I was thinking about our conversation a year ago, a month ago, a minute ago. I was
Sure.
thinking about that. And here's what I'm thinking. And
Yeah.
it can add to the conversation. It also shows kids that you can reflect and change your mind and come back and have a different perspective and all those magic things we want them to know how to do as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so what now? What do we do?
Yeah.
Keep walking us through this.
Well, I think we think about what we're saying and
Yeah.
what we're saying out loud and in our heads,
Yeah.
and then we think about what else is out there. Like, what do I always talk to parents too about know what's on your kids' social media feed, which is hard because they probably got a spam account you don't know about, and all those things. Uh,
Oh, sneaky.
Right.
Damn.
So you could ask, develop those relationships to be able to ask, but just ask, like, what do you hear at school? What are people talking about? What's the thing today? How many people at school that are sitting around not eating lunch? How do you talk about your body with your friends? How is it
Ooh.
to be an adolescent today? I mean, it's
Hmm.
when I was an adolescent, you had to like seek the media images a bit, right? You had magazines and you saw them in the checkout lane or you saw them in your house, but you could walk away from the magazine or you could leave the store and you wouldn't see it. But now it's right in front of you all the time, right?
Right.
So really understanding what your teen sort of media consumption is and what are the images they're seeing and what is that making them believe about themselves. When kids, teens talk about influencers or people they follow or people that are in the news or in celebrity
Yeah.
conversations for whatever, ask them how it makes them feel about themselves. How does it make you feel? Because kids with a pretty healthy body image, sense of self would be like, no, no, that's them, or it's sort of an externalizing conversation that they're talking about that person.
Sure.
Kids who are hearing those sort of media pressures and those social influences will be like, oh, I just don't think I'll ever look like that, be like that. How come I don't have? I wish I could have. Those are the kinds of words you're going to hear.
Yeah.
But it comes from that conversation, which is tricky, right? And it's little bits, little dollops every day or every couple days. You're not going to have the one landmark body image conversation,
Right.
but keeping that door open, I think, is really important. And modeling, like,
Modeling.
how do you model? Kids want to do what they see us do that feels good, and what they
Yeah.
see other people do that feels good. So how do we model? Like, oh my gosh, I love those earrings. Wow, that sweater looks so cool with your eyes.
Yeah.
Like, we can comment on appearance in ways that are really helpful
Yeah.
and not damaging. So modeling that.
What do you say to the women and the men who are like openly struggling with their weight and then they're telling their kids, I can't eat that because it makes me this. I can't eat that because I like, how do we address that?
Yeah, that's where there's so much to say about that. I think that the food talk we do is really it's really our inner monologue coming out, right? And
Yeah.
it's that struggle we have around like, I can't eat that and I because of this. Then that's actually an emotion. Like, boy, I mean, what that person is saying, if you
Yes.
unpack that, is I am afraid to eat that. I'm just gonna say it's a brownie.
Yes.
I'm afraid to eat that brownie because if I eat a brownie, I'm going to want to eat the whole pan. And I can't eat the whole pan because I'll feel so out of control that I'll probably also like eat something else and then I'll feel terrible and I'll feel guilty and I'll feel overwhelmed and I will feel out of control and I don't know what to do about it. So instead, we just say, I can't eat that.
Right.
So, really, what's behind it is I feel something. I feel afraid. I feel mad. I feel worried. I feel something. And the brownie holds all the feelings instead of us actually managing the feelings. The brownie's job is not to hold the feelings, the brownie's job is to be a brownie. But yet we give it all this work and we make ourselves feel terrible and it doesn't really help. Like then whoever's hearing that thinks like, wow, brownies are bad and I probably should be afraid of brownies too. Not very helpful.
Wow. So like for me, I have gluten intolerance. I just like it doesn't wear well with me, right?
Mhm.
Working through it. So when I say I can't have that, um, my the rest of my family eats it. So that's okay.
Yeah, you can. I mean, I think you can say no, thank you. I mean, that's the other thing, right? That
Mm,
that not everybody needs to know why we can't eat something or why we choose not to eat something. And
yeah.
and really, in eating disorder recovery, the ultimate, I've said this a million times to clients of mine at the Emily program, like the ultimate thing we're getting you to do in recovery or hoping for you in recovery is
Yep.
that you get to make a choice about what you're eating based in all kinds of things that are positive and work for you, but not based in fear or loathing or uh, avoidance. So you get to make a choice. Like, no thanks.
Mm,
Is People don't really need to know that you can't eat that. I mean, it's fine, I
yeah.
guess, but
Yeah,
but really,
but that's not honesty. Like
right.
what your child was yelling to you at the other room was keep your inside voice inside. Like
Right.
Think it. Don't
Right.
say it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. We don't need to hear everybody's inner monologue about their food. It's really interesting, right? Food is one of the places where we do hear everybody's inner monologue. Like
totally.
people say stuff about food all the time and bodies that we don't walk up to people and be like, "Oh my gosh, my left shoe, you wouldn't believe what my heel looks like right now. I can't believe I can't get the skin on my left heel to not be so whatever it is. Like, do you have a lotion I can use?" Nobody does that. Or maybe most people don't do that, right? But people are like, "Oh, I can't eat this and I can't eat that and I can't eat that and my jeans don't fit and this and that." Why do we do that?
Oh, you have given me something new. Oh,
Excellent.
that's remarkable.
That's
We don't
awesome.
do that. We
Right.
don't say, I have a massive callus on my left toe and I cannot expose that thing for the life of me. You will feel so disgusted with me. You will just, we don't do that.
Right. Right. We don't. But we've been
Oh,
socialized to do about our food because then we somehow get credit or points or respect or joining. People that love to join in the misery, right? And we love then to join in opposition to people who seem like they're doing it right. We often talk about, in the genetics of eating disorders, that some people are just less interested in food from a reward system perspective, like the
yeah,
reward wiring in their brain just isn't quite as interested.
yeah,
And I often will say, like, those people who forget to eat,
yeah,
and most people are like, yeah. And then I say, yeah, we hate them, right? Like most people are like, what? How could you forget to eat? And so it's just a genetic difference. Like some
yeah,
people are really rewarded by food
yeah.
and some people aren't. But this idea that somehow we need to be able to like control ourselves around food and have the right answer around food drives the comments we make around like, I can't eat that, or I'm being bad, or I shouldn't eat that. All inner monologue, not very helpful. Lots of other things we could do with that brain space. That would be much more productive.
Wow, there's lots of other things we can do with that brain space that would be more productive. And I'm even thinking about, you know, um, anytime you scroll through anything or now when you're looking, everything, it's like, well, take this and take that and these supplements and this. And lots of times, I mean, as a person going through menopause, I'm like, what, it's almost whiplash where, okay, I gotta have my flax, I gotta have my this, I gotta have, and you begin to panic and your cortisol jumps, your everything starts to spike and you now have anxiety. And then it's, I didn't take my magnesium before bed. Oh no, I'm not going to sleep. And all of a sudden, your whole world crashes. It's because there's an urgency. There's an urgency to most of the things that we see right now. And our
There is.
body doesn't need urgency, it needs
Yeah,
presence.
it does. It
Okay,
does.
so this genetics of of what is it? Genetics of eating disorder?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we think it is that there's not like one gene that,
Okay.
you have an eating disorder, you won't. It's
Sure.
genetics around anxiety. So interesting you bring that up, that
Okay.
that people with eating disorders have a much higher rate of co-occurrence of anxiety than people without eating disorders. It's really sort of they just kind of go hand in hand. And I like to frame that anxiety as kind of what you were just talking about, like high noticing. So if you think about it, like, remember when we didn't have high def TV?
Yes.
Like then it came on the scene and we were like, oh my gosh, you can see every pore on somebody's face, or you can really see that vivid blue color that person's wearing in the newscaster
Yeah.
outfit. And that sort of high noticing, like we didn't even know that we couldn't see that before. We didn't even know it was that good.
Right.
That kind of high noticing is the sort of temperament that a lot of people who are at risk for an eating disorder and lots of people who have eating disorders have. They have that temperament. They just notice. So it's the genetics that get people to just notice. So they notice not just appearance things, but they notice wind. They notice tags on their clothes. I am a tag noticer. I love the like print the tag on the clothes. One of the best inventions ever, because those little scratchy tags, I'm pretty sure somebody like made them as scratchy as humanly possible to
As
bother me.
humanly possible. It's like
Totally.
knives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are we doing this?
Why are we doing this? So a lot of people, when I say something about the tags, they're like, there's tags in my clothes. And I'm like, oh, must be very pleasant to be in that
Be
calm,
you.
peaceful brain, not my brain. So
No.
that like noticing of touch, of sensation, of noise, of wind, of, people who need earplugs at events when other people don't even notice that it's loud. People who don't really like going out in the wind because it just feels uncomfortable. People who don't like tags, people who will walk in a room and see a picture sort of crooked, people who will see a lot of the details. It's not a good or bad trait. We don't want to categorize that. It just
No.
is. And if you have the trait that is really high noticing, you're going to notice. And you're going to notice every one of those Instagram posts. And you're going to notice what they're trying to sell you. And you're going to notice what's maybe not what you don't have and how that could fix what you don't have. And then you're going to get sucked right into the advertising, just like that advertising company wants you to get sucked in, right? It's beautiful psychology to
It's
get us
amazing.
roped in, right? It's beautiful. So let's, applaud that. And how do we use that to our benefit? So it's really that kind of genetics of high noticing that can also feel be experienced in the body as anxiety. Because if
Yep.
you're noticing everything, you're taking in all this information, it's a little anxiety provoking, right? Because you just have so much coming in.
Is another word for that hypervigilance?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Yep. Hypervigilance would be you know, I'm looking for I'm looking for danger, I'm looking for potential threats, I'm wanting to be safe. That's a great thing that allows us to do a lot of amazing safer things.
Yes.
And then people without that trait or maybe also have a trait of impulsivity, we partner well with the hypervigilant and the impulsive partner well together because the
Yep.
hypervigilant will keep us safe, but the impulsive person is going to get us out of the thing
Yes.
and not be as worried. So we
Right.
really see that anxiety trait and that impulsivity trait as some
Yeah.
of the two most common genetically mediated traits that people with eating disorders have, which kind of makes sense, right? If you have either or both of those traits, you're going to notice all the stuff about what my body should look like, what my food should look like, and how I should
Right.
change it, and you're going to be much more susceptible to sledding down the slippery slope than the person who doesn't have those traits. That's the genetics.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would never have thought that.
Yeah. It's fascinating. And we wouldn't have talked about it. 15 years ago, I've been in the field of eating disorders for 30 years,
Yep.
and only half of my career have we known that. That's newer information. It makes total sense. We used to know that, sort of trait wise or temperament wise, we could say, some people are really more anxiety prone or sort of maybe impulsive, but the fact that our brains do that on a functional MRI, we're like, there it is.
There it is.
That makes it actually biological, which
Yeah.
is the part where genetics have really taken hold, is that's biological. It just is how your brain works. And the really tricky thing is when that brain goes on a diet, it goes down the slippery slope, much more likely than somebody else.
Oh, okay. Talk to us about that. Okay, so that hypervigilance, that high noticing individual who I would say to term, and even you can correct me, but sensitive, more sensitive to their environment. When that brain of that person says, I'm making a choice to cut this out, to restrict my diet in some way or another. Now, the slope gets more slippery for that person than someone who doesn't have these traits.
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
so that's amazing. Please elaborate on that.
Yeah. And it might not even be, to make that sort of take that even further, it might not even be something they decided to do. They might have had an illness that took their appetite away for a while. And
Sure.
that's sort of what started it. Or they might have had something bad happened when they were eating, like they choked on some food, or they had a bad experience with a food because they ended up eating something and then, having food poisoning right after, or having an illness right after, and that maybe they associate with the food even if it wasn't. And so something happens. So it's either they decide to do something because they heard in health class that XYZ food is bad, so why have that? Or something that they didn't even choose to do happens. And so then that brain says, okay, what do I do? I'm noticing how I feel and I'm noticing all of these things. And the fascinating part is that when that brain gets a little bit less food, a little less energy,
Yeah.
it actually is a little calmer. And so that feels
Oh,
kind of nice. And so that person is like, well, dieting's not so bad. I don't know why people are whining about this. It's not so hard to skip a meal or not eat those foods or work out some extra amount. Actually, I feel kind of calm. which is really reinforcing, right?
Sure.
So then that person just keeps doing the thing that's helping them to feel calm, even though they're just feeling a little better. So they keep doing it, and then the outside world comes in and says, "Wow, you have such willpower. How do you do it?" Or maybe they lose a little bit of weight and the outside world says, "You look great."
Now
And
there's
so that
reinforcement.
right. So that calmer person says, "The world likes me better. I feel a little calmer. Why wouldn't I keep doing this?" And that's not exactly the dialogue they're having, but that's what the sense of what's happening in their brains. And so they
Yeah.
sort of keep on the path. And then at some point, somebody gets concerned, which is really confusing. Like people often, when they confront somebody that they think might have an eating disorder and it doesn't go well, they're like, how come they're so mad?
Yeah.
Well, in part because their brain has found a place where they're calm and people are giving them lots of positive reinforcement for that, and now you're telling them they're wrong, and they're pretty attuned to when they're getting it wrong, and so they're a little confused.
Why are we thinking? I this is my inside voice coming out now because now I'm rethinking my whole life here. I'm like, we constantly reinforce people's appearance.
Yes.
Well, that's the. You look at someone. What's the first thing you say to someone often? Oh, you look so good.
Yeah. And what does that mean when we say that? Because we don't actually mean that. What do we mean?
Um, for me, when I say it, it's usually because I see a difference in their glow or their face, like they look more alive. It isn't, but it could be. I've said it before to people who I see maybe less weight in bloating or weight in their face or less water retention. It's weird. I think it's different with every
Yeah.
person. But what you're saying is, why are we doing this?
Yeah. And if we're really, the other thing I think you're probably meaning when you say it is, it's so good to see you.
Yes. Why don't I just say that?
Why don't you just say that? Why don't we just say that?
Why don't we?
I think it's because that's about us and it's more vulnerable, and we are a little uncomfortable talking about our feelings and our experience. And so if we say, "Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you," then
Yes.
we're asking the person to engage with us on how they feel. If we say, "Oh, you look great," we've just like batted the tennis ball right over the net. We're not vulnerable. We're putting it over them. And then they're probably, maybe because of our social context, going to say, "Oh, so do you," or "I got a new skin cream," or whatever, right? So we're setting up a dialogue where we're noticing something and then we get to talk about the magic that happened for that person. And sometimes the magic is like they got a new job and they are glowing, and that's a great thing to talk about. A lot of times it's the like, okay, what did I do different that got me this praise? And then we get into that conversation. So instead, I encourage people like try saying, "Hey, it's so great to see you," and see what happens.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What does a person who is struggling with an eating disorder hear in that moment?
Oh, they hear, I must need to lose more weight. They must know what I just ate. I can't stop over exercising or I won't look great. I only am getting these compliments because of all of the stuff that I'm doing. Wow, I just threw up right before I came here as part of the eating disorder symptoms that I experience. And now I have to keep doing that because that apparently makes me look better. Or I'm never going to look as good as that person, or a million other things, and all of those things at once.
Whoa. You know, something that I've been in search of is conversation about body dysmorphia. I don't, why is that something that we're not hearing a lot about?
Yeah, it's a good question. We
Because
hear
I'm
about it.
noticing people, now you obviously, you know this. So I'm seeing people who are young, they're filling their lips. They're filling like the lines and whatever they see the smallest of line and now they're getting it filled and whatever, like it's almost like this is not, it's smaller than we think, it's bigger than, like they're augmenting their body to be bigger or to be more round or more streamlined. I don't know, but what is happening?
Yeah. It's this. the societal ideal as it evolves, right? And plus the availability. Like you don't even have to go get a filler to get a product that acts like a filler on your skin, because your social media will feed you that product. You can get a serum that'll make your skin glow like it might, all of the things that we see. And so I think we're doing it. The simple answer is we're doing it because we're selling it to ourselves with the promise that people will like us better because it will look better. At the end of the day, I mean, we're humans who want to be part of the group. And so we do what gets us accepted as part of the group. And when we see something that says, if you did this, you'd be a better part of the group and people might like you more, well, that's a powerful motivator to do that thing.
Oh my goodness.
And adding on top of that, the other genetics we see are in people with eating disorders are people that really don't like to get it wrong. Like most people don't like to get things
Yeah,
wrong, but like
right.
really don't like to get things wrong. You know, those people when they start to learn a new thing and they're like, they make mistakes and they get up and they start over and they're having a great time learning. And then there's the other folks that are like, oh, it's really hard to learn because I really don't like being good at something,
Right.
right? I might be in the second group. My husband might be in the first group. And so we just also there's just sort of a genetic temperament trait of like having a hard time getting it wrong. And
Yeah.
so if you and in society, if you don't look the right way or you're not getting it right or you're not doing enough of the thing, the filler,
Yeah.
the whatever it is, we're so much more aware that we're kind of not getting it right or not quite measuring up, and it's really uncomfortable.
But this is but that is feels unreachable to me, and it terrifies me to think about this young generation, my nieces, my nephews, like how they will begin to look at themselves or others, or just the idea of what a perfect life is supposed to look like, and feel like they have to catch up all the time. This is dysregulating our nervous system. This idea that, like what you said at the beginning of the show, where they probably did that, recorded that 15 times and got the lighting right, and have three camera angles. Like, this is not the reality that we're living in.
Yeah, i think it's I think it's really because of our desire to belong.
Damn.
And our desire to belong mixed with what we see all of the time. I mean, the more exposure you have to it, the more you want to feel like you need
Yep.
to belong
Yep.
to be in it. So I think that, I mean, the really hard answer for all of those kids, I mean, I sort of chuckle as I say this, but the really hard answer is put the phones down. It just is. Like, put the phones down and find real life connection.
Yep.
So I know the phones aren't going anywhere.
No.
We got them. They're great in so many ways, right? But you got to put them down and connect with real people. Why do we have so many movies about like robots connecting and people connecting with robots and all of these stories that were like, that'll never happen. Really? People spend all day with their phone, right? So maybe it's happening.
Yeah.
And exactly what you're saying, the online world is so exciting and interesting and well lit and well performed that we want to have that life. And so more and more and more we just live in the allure of the magic. And so
Mm.
it is put the phone down and go out and talk to people in real life. Like phone down, IRL. That's what you got to do.
Yep.
And it's hard because everybody's got their phones. But we really we this is a whole new way of being as a human race.
Yes.
We've got to figure out how to maintain connection. That's actually connection.
Maintain connection. What's next on the list? What are we after genetics? After thinking about what we're saying, after modeling, what is the next item?
What about weight stigma, which is a sort of an evolution of what you're talking about? But I think it's so powerful for a number of reasons, right? If you have somebody commenting on people who live in larger bodies in ways that is um, dismissive, demoralizing, denigrating, making creating an idea and supporting an idea that people who are in larger bodies are less than,
Mm.
which is ironic, that weight stigma is so powerful in our society. And now we have all these new amazing medications
Yeah.
that are leading people to lose lots of weight, which I could talk for hours about that, but my brief comment is, what if we get to the place where the world says, well, everybody can lose weight, so nobody should have a larger body? That's terrifying because genetically, some people have larger bodies, some people have smaller bodies.
Yeah.
And so that is continuing to fuel weight stigma in a way that makes it really hard for people to get through the individualized, individual responsibility to actually the genetics. Like we just blame people. We blame people for looking a certain way, and then we make fun of them and we think less of them, and we do that as a society. So I think that weight stigma piece, of course, it's frightening to not look like the perfect world, because the world is really mean to you, frankly,
Very mean.
when you live in a larger body, right? And so I think that's a really important piece to think about. And then if you take that further, and it's really important when we think about eating disorders, because only 6% of people with eating disorders meet what we think of when we think of somebody with an eating disorder, typically. Most people, when you say, eating disorder, they think of somebody who's underweight. So
That's right.
6% of people with an eating disorder are underweight. 94% of people with an eating disorder are like a regular weight, or what we might categorize as a higher weight. So 94% of people are in a body that somebody wouldn't say, oh my gosh, you're so thin, how did you do it? Kind of rhetoric, right? And so a lot of those people are experiencing weight stigma because their bodies are wrong as society views them. And so they're on this cycle of like, I know my body's wrong. I'm really upset about that. I get treated poorly. I get treated less well at work. I get treated less well at the doctor. I get treated less well by my romantic partners. I get treated less well in the street. I get treated less well everywhere. And so what does their society tell us to do when we don't feel very good? A lot of messages out there about eating your feelings, soothing yourself with food. And so people start to soothe themselves with food. They fall into this, I feel bad. I eat to soothe myself with food. Now I feel bad because I ate, and now I'm going to gain weight, and people are going to be more mean to me, and I'm going to go eat to soothe myself. Messy.
Very
So
messy.
very messy. So the stigmatization of people's bodies, is a lot of what we've been talking about. But that weight stigma is so powerful, that we just need to stop. We need to stop when people make fat jokes. We need to stop people when they make a negative comment about somebody's body that's dismissive because they live in a larger body. We need to say stop. We need to say that's not okay. That's not respectful. And we need to model that for our kids. And that I have a hard line on. We would stop people from telling jokes about other things that we find repulsive now. At least I hope we do.
Yes.
We can do that with weight stigma. No, actually that's really kind of cruel. You can do it nicely. Sometimes I lose my patience and I'm not so nice, but it's got to be said. And if we can role model that for kids, then they're going to treat other kids differently. They're really going to accept kids. So that weight stigma piece is really huge. And commenting on people's weight, zip it. Just, it's really great to see you is the,
Yes.
way to do it. So that's a whole can of worms.
Yes, that is a can of worms.
Oh.
Well, it's things that we aren't. To your point previously, it's like we're not thinking. We're not thinking, and
Right.
that's what I'm hearing. I'm seeing how I need to adjust. It's not that I'm, overdoing this. It's just more about being more intentional. Being more intentional about things that I'm saying and things that I just think are a given. You'll figure it out. I don't mean it that way.
Yep.
That's not to someone who is struggling. That's the first thing they hear and the only thing they hear. And they're not going to get past it.
Right. Right. Yeah. So adjusting, if we could all adjust our language a little bit, we could bring that 29 million people number down, because a little bit of a language adjustment would go a long way.
And so what is this? What is like, that's a big number. And I mean, maybe I'm out of touch, but I'm not seeing a lot of conversation about this.
Yeah.
Am I out of touch on that?
No, I think you're not. I mean, I can think of other things that impact 9 to 10% of the population that we talk about all the time. And with eating disorders, we don't talk about them all the time. And I think in part, it's because of the stigma associated with mental health and then the stigma associated with eating disorders. And I tell this story a lot, but I fly a lot for work. And I sit down on the plane, and if I talk to the person next to me, which I often don't, so if anybody hears me, you can say, hey, you could talk to me on the plane, that I usually don't, because when I say to people in that, like, oh, where are you going? What do you do? When I say, oh, I work in eating disorders, or I help people with eating disorders, they're like, oh, eating disorders. They say one of three things. This is my scientific study of my own experience.
Sure.
They say one of three things. They say, oh, I had an eating disorder. My friend did, my partner did, my son did, my daughter did, my niece did, whatever. My coworker did. And we talk about that.
Okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
Like, unfortunate they did, but that's usually a very beautiful conversation. The other two are very less beautiful, if
Okay.
that's a word. The other two are, I don't get why people would do that. And then they probably wish they didn't sit next to me on a plane. So I say something
Because
like,
you got a captive audience.
I know. I'm like, did you know? That's so curious you say that. Did you know that they're actually not just doing that? Like, eating disorders aren't a choice. You probably wouldn't sit next to somebody who is, talking to you about being an oncologist and say, I don't know why people go get cancer. It's the same, it's just as ridiculous to say, I don't know why somebody would do that about an eating disorder as I don't know why somebody would do that about getting cancer. We wouldn't say that.
Wow.
But we do with eating disorders because we believe that there's some sort of like individual responsibility. This person is choosing to do something. They're choosing to have this illness, and people don't choose it. Nobody would choose to have an eating disorder. So I think that's an interesting learning opportunity, hopefully, for that person. And they probably hope the flight is very short. But
10 hours later.
right. Like, there's genetics. I talked about all this stuff. And sometimes that conversation is great because they're like, wow, I had no idea. And I'll never say that again. I'm like,
Right.
great.
Sure.
The third thing people say is even more distressing. And they say, I wish I could have an eating disorder just for a little bit so I could lose weight. And then they really wish they didn't sit next to me because then I say something like, did you know that eating disorders have the second highest mortality rate of any mental health diagnosis? And more people die from eating disorders than anything else other than opioid overdose deaths. This is a life-threatening illness that's terrible to have. And then I tell them about what it's like to have it and talk about what happens to your body and your mind. And like, you want to choose that just to lose a little bit of weight? That tells me something about our society.
Yes, that does tell you, and it tells me, and it tells everyone that's listening something about our society. It was interesting. The one thing that in my research that I found was what you just said. The way people find themselves down this slippery slope is they say, I will only eat like this for a while and then I'll snap out of it. But like you said, if you live in a body that is high noticing and now you feel calmer, then when you say I'm going to snap out of it and then you notice that you're not calm anymore and you come back down again, now you're there.
Yep.
What we're not seeing, we're not hearing is that is not the right way to do it. There's no like right or wrong way. It's just we have to learn to take in this information that you are saying to us and begin to do something that you said at the very beginning, belonging. Mm-hmm. What you're saying to young people is you belong. And we all live in these bodies that are our spiritual, physical houses. And everyone's different. And we need to be able to accept that, starting with ourselves.
Right. Absolutely. And it gives us too, I think, a way to, a lot of times people ask, how would I know if somebody I love is struggling with an eating disorder, or another question that I love people say, like, well, I had an eating disorder and I'm well now, but how would I know if I was struggling again or what happens there? But maybe now it gives people a way to think about what are the things you'd see. Sure, maybe you'd see somebody like cutting out foods that they used to eat regularly, but they don't eat them now. And they're saying things like, I can't have that. Or, I learned in health class I shouldn't eat that. So they might hear those more overt things.
Yep.
They might also see like extra workouts or, supplement powders that weren't there before, or weightlifting regimens that weren't there before, or body checking, touching the body all over to figure out what it feels like that they didn't notice before. Those are the more obvious signs. But you might also see the isolation and the irritability that
Interesting.
come when people are feeling like they don't quite belong. They're not quite feeling comfortable. They're feeling uh, like they're trying to follow a set of rules and it's very difficult. People get irritable. They get irritable when they get hungry, which
Yeah.
many people with an eating disorder are. And they get irritable when they think they've done something that they're not super proud of or they're not feeling very good about. So they're irritable, they get isolated. They might start talking in a way that you haven't really heard them talk about around their mental health before. Those are signs. They might start talking about a lot about, this person or that person or what they're doing with their bodies. And you might see them, you'll just see them doing things that aren't as typical. You sometimes will see them not doing as well in school or having problems in work. But the tricky part about eating disorders is a lot of times people are doing great at school, doing great at work. They're still high, top performers and high achievers. And yet they have this, life-threatening illness. So it's really sometimes a subtle sense of, this person never wants to go out anymore because they say they're busy all the time. But if I think about it, everything I've asked them to do is around food. I wonder if I asked them to go for a walk, if they'd go,
Oh, wow.
or if I asked
Wow.
them to go, hang out and see the new flower show or something, would they
Sure.
go if it wasn't food related? That can be a little litmus test.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I, part of our world connects with food.
Yes.
Let's go for an appy, let's go for a coffee, let's go for a drink. Like it's where that's the sharing, the breaking of bread, the sharing with one another. We can step out of that and do some things differently. Now, the the Emily program creates, well, the vision is a world of peaceful relationships with food, weight, and body image where everyone with an eating disorder can experience recovery. I was interested when I was looking at the website and I was going through it. And one of the things that struck me was that the family is connected and involved. I did a show a long time ago with someone about mental illness, and they said, when you're treating anxiety, it's important to treat the family. When you're treating depression, it's important to not just treat the person with the depression, but the family, because everybody is in this together and it feels like they're not, but everybody's, your community that you're with internalize certain things in different ways. And I just found that so beautiful. And maybe it's challenging because maybe when you are dealing with the person that is struggling with their body image or what they're doing in their life, and then you meet the caregivers and you're like, okay, well, you're reinforcing this. How does that work? Because that to me is really, it's really powerful actually.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's an amazing part of treatment. And uh, we think a lot about why would the family do something like that, say something like that, have that thing around food, right?
Judgment.
And so we really, yep, we really think, sort of train our new staff, the Emily program, to think about like, what do you bring into this? What kind of diet culture influence thoughts do you bring? Probably those parents or that family member or those siblings have some of those things too,
Mm.
that they live in this, they swim in these waters, right? So they're saying the same things that society says, and we're going to help them to think about them differently, just like we've been talking about. We have this kind of conversation with families around, here's a way to think about how we all think about and talk about and interact with food. And here's a way it could be, because you're right that food is very connecting. We're not telling anybody that food, has to not be that source of connection.
Yeah.
We want food to be a connection between people, not a connection between isolation and anxiety. So that we're really looking with families to talk to them about how the world works and then how they can help their loved one work in that world optimally, like in line with sort of their unique selves. And I
Mm.
think families change a lot through that process because they realize all the things that they've heard and believed, They get a lot of their, a lot of doubts come to mind, like, well, I've believed this thing about whatever brownies my whole life, and you're telling me that's maybe not true. So we challenge a lot of beliefs, and that often helps to shift the family around, creating a recovery supporting atmosphere. And recovery in a way is sort of countercultural, that having an eating disorder experience and then living in the world is a lot of like, oh, I'm not going to buy what you're selling me, I'm going to stay connected to me. So helping families to do that for themselves and also to support their loved ones, because recovery happens in community. That I have so many people who say like, no, I want to do this by myself, I don't need help. And I did the same thing when I was sick, when I had an eating disorder, like, no, I got this. That's just sort of the temperament we have. Like, we got this.
Yep.
And I'll always say to that person, that is so great that you are going to do so much work to support yourself, and you got this. And we all need community, because if you broke your leg and you had crutches and you were in a wheelchair and you needed to open the door, you would let somebody open the door for you. You might want to try to push the button, but you would probably let somebody open the door for you, and you wouldn't feel like you weren't doing enough to heal your broken leg.
You're
So
right.
we're going to let your family come in, and the way that they're going to open the door for you is that they're going to sit with you at meals, and they're going to help you prepare your food, and they're going to distract you after meals, and they're going to check in with you, and they're going to be your supporters, and they're going to ask you what you're looking at on social media, and they're going to watch movies with you. And it's the same thing. We just really have to help families to see how they can be supported and supportive. And we want to make sure they don't feel blamed, because we're all living in this, this ocean of social
Craziness.
messages about bodies.
It's craziness. This ocean
Yeah.
of crazy messages. It is assaulting, because everywhere you turn, there's
Yep.
something that's, telling you something. We are reinforcing to one another that and eating disorders. We're reinforcing this by being on the bandwagon. And this isn't an alarmist sort of thing. This is just more, I was talking with somebody yesterday, and she said, if we can begin to heal ourselves, then we can free our mind. And if we can free our mind and heal ourselves, then we will begin to heal the people that we're in community with. And then that healing changes the world.
Absolutely. We have
Oh,
our founder of the founder of the Emily program. His name is Dirk, and his sister's name is Emily. Hence
okay.
the name. His
Yes.
sister is alive and well and doing great. Uh, but
Awesome.
he has this saying that is sort of our employee policy,
Yes.
that says, "Do what you want, but be able to explain it to a community of your peers."
Oh,
Which I think is really interesting. Do what you want, but be able to explain it to a community of your peers. Because in your example, if you're looking at your lips and you're like, I don't like them, I want to go get them done. If you can go sit down at your friends, with your friends over a cup of tea and say, you know what, I just wanted to get my, some filler in my lip, because if I felt livelier and more confident, and that made me feel really good, and I'm really happy about it, great. You're doing what you want,
right.
and you're able to explain it to a community of your peers. If you're like, oh, I bought that thing because it just kept showing up on my Instagram, and I really mad at myself for spending all that money, and it didn't do the thing it was going to do, and I feel so had. And
Yeah.
okay, like, do what you want, be able to explain it to a community of your peers. And that, I think, really helps us to, like, if I had to explain why I'm doing this to somebody, could I? And the most important person we should explain it to is ourselves. Right?
And the words matter. I just recently did a podcast on this. It was my why. And I'm, after all these episodes, I finally came to the conclusion I needed to say why I'm doing what I'm doing. And part of it was, when we speak, we create worlds. Our words matter. And what we say comes to life. And so when we're speaking about ourselves, we're creating a world. And then we have to undo that. And it's the undoing that is the most difficult part. Because if you are not in a space of self-love and belonging, then you are setting yourself up. And I've lived in that space for decades, so I'm one to talk. I'm learning now that my words matter and that my words can cause life or death, literally.
Absolutely. Yep.
And this is huge.
Yep. They matter to other people and they really matter to us.
But do what you want, but be able to explain it to a community of your peers.
Yep.
That's words to live by.
It is. It's so, I mean, eating disorders are this unique illness that has this enormous medical component. Like all kinds of bad things can happen to your body with an eating
Yes.
disorder. There's just so many things.
Yes.
And it's a diagnosable mental health condition,
Yep.
but it has the most medical stuff, I'm sure that's the technical term, the most medical stuff of all the mental health diagnoses. And so when you put those two things together, it's such a powerfully debilitating illness, can be.
Yeah.
And it's also really confusing because it's something's wrong with a basic function, which is eating, right? It's in the name, eating disorders. And we always say, eating disorders aren't about food, but they sure are about food when food shows up, because they're really not as much about food. Food is the vehicle for the expression of what's happening, but they're sure about food when there's food around, which is most of the time. So I think it's sort of a fun thing we say, like, yeah, that kind of helps people understand it. They're not about food, but they are when food's there.
Yes.
So they're sort of this complicated thing. But I think it's part of the stigma around eating disorders is that uh, if we talked more about it, we probably have to acknowledge that more of us have at least disordered eating, if not an eating disorder. And it would require vulnerability to say, I need help with a thing that society tells me I should know exactly how to do, and I should follow all the rules, and I should do the right way. And it's saying, like, I need help with this thing that is so powerfully messaged in our world. And so it's confusing. I have had so many people who are coming into the field say, oh, in graduate school, my advisor told me, don't ever work with the people with eating disorders. They're the hardest. You don't want to work with that population. I mean, how demeaning and demoralizing to
Yeah.
say that to somebody. And it's
Sure.
only because people don't understand.
Right.
People don't understand that people with eating disorders they, as a group. I mean, this is a generalization, but I feel like I've been in the field and worked with enough people I can earn the right to say it. Like,
Sure.
people with eating disorders are generally pretty delightful, thoughtful, insightful,
Yes.
vibrant humans that
Right.
have had their lights dimmed by this terrible illness.
Mm.
And our job in treatment is helping them sort of bring that light back, which is amazing. It's amazing to get to
Mm.
do that. And so I think that the stigma that people have around, like, why can't you just eat? Like, I've had so many people say, like, I don't get why they just don't eat. And of course we've thought about telling them just to eat. That's not a new idea. Or why
Right.
don't they just stop overtraining, or stop throwing up, or stop abusing diet pills, or stop abusing laxatives, or stop taking whatever they're doing that's part of the eating disorder. Stop overeating. I think there's so much stigma because there's so much judgment around somebody not getting their eating right. Right. So it's really hard to talk about it, think about it, have it be a conversation when it's going to touch on us.
Wow. Yes. It's harder when we know it's going to touch on us.
Yeah.
Can you said something disordered eating? As we wrap up, what is disordered eating? Yeah.
They don't quite meet the how we sort of categorize eating disorders. So they're not a diagnosable eating disorder set of behaviors, but they're probably a set of behaviors that most people would say, something's probably off about that. And the problem is that so many people do things with their eating,
Yes.
right? So that's part of it too, that there's probably, 10 to 15% of the population that's like got a positive, healthy, normal, peaceful relationship with food. And then you got the 10% of people with an eating disorder. And then you got everybody in between that probably has some form of disordered eating. It's the constant pursuit of weight loss. It's the constant pursuit of having just the right food, or clean eating, or fad diets, like all of the things. So the kind of fad diet world, or the
Yeah.
popular diet world, is full of disordered eating, because that gets us to distance ourselves from our experience with food back to where we started. If something comes in that interferes with your ability choose for yourself, to check in with yourself to see what it is you want to eat based on what's available, that can be a bit disordered. That we really want people to be able to say, well, what am I hungry for? Oh wait, I have to back up. What does hungry feel like for me? How do I know if I'm hungry? Okay, now that I know how it feels to be hungry, I can think about what I'm hungry for. Do I have that? Maybe I don't. Maybe I do. Maybe am
Mm,
experiencing food insecurity and I don't have that, and that's frustrating. Like, what are the things that are getting in the way of me being able to have this thing I want?
yeah.
And then we eat. And then the other part of that is, am I satisfied? Am I full? Oh wait, I gotta back up. What does it feel like to be satisfied or full?
Mm,
Okay, so am I full? Am I satisfied? That's a process that
yes.
takes more thought and self-reflection than eat the food that's on your plate and clean your plate because somebody's telling you to do that, and then you can move on. So it's the internal locus of experience versus
Mhm.
an external locus of control.
And how much do emotions drive that? Because I I unworthiness, shame, self-loathing, those are really big feelings. Those are
Yeah,
that's it's a very heavy weight. So how does that interplay with eating disorders
yeah,
and disordered eating?
absolutely. So if we feel those feelings for whatever reason, society tells us one of the best things we can do is to eat something, right? That to
Yep.
like numb them somehow. So we have a lot of information on sort of how to do it, quote
Yep.
unquote. We don't naturally tend to eat our feelings. We get sort of told to do that,
Right.
or we get told that food will solve our problems. So we feel those feelings. We start to eat something, and the experience of that emotion is a bit of a wave. That it'll
Okay.
feel intense, and then it'll kind of quiet down. Right.
Mm,
If we're eating during the intense period or right before it gets intense, we blunt it, and then it sort of kind of stays blunt and we're eating, and so we're not really noticing, we're just sort of zoning out, and so that feels a little preferable to experiencing the wave of the emotion.
okay.
So we're training our brains to know, like, oh, I feel uncomfortable, I'll have something to eat, that sort of goes away, and then I can forget that I was feeling that way and move on.
Sure.
That pattern is definitely a disordered eating pattern, and the process through that is saying, like, okay, we're going to feel that really uncomfortable feeling, and feeling uncomfortable feelings is super uncomfortable, and we're
Yes.
going to feel that I feel jittery and I feel my skin feels tight and I feel like I want to explode and I want to yell and I want to
Yes.
crawl in a hole in the ground, I want to disappear, all of
I'm
the things that,
hangry. I'm hangry,
right,
maybe.
all
Yep.
of those things,
Okay.
right. And we're going to say, okay, how does that feel? Where do I feel that in my body? How could I like help that feeling to dissipate? It turns out that a lot of those feelings can dissipate if we move our bodies a little, not like robust
Yeah.
activity, but like
Sure.
get up and move around, go for a little stroll, do some deep breathing, do some yoga poses, really move our bodies in a way that help our brains to know, like, it's okay. That feeling is there and the world is still relatively okay. I'm okay in it. And then we can move on. And then we actually have the feeling and let it dissipate versus start to have it, blunt it with food, and then never really address it. So the a lot of times in disordered eating and eating disorders, food is sort of blunting that emotion in a way that we really need to teach ourselves how to have emotions and how to experience those in a way that isn't so distressing.
Because we're filling ourselves up. We're just not filling up in the right spot.
Exactly.
You're
Yep.
calling us to filling ourselves up with noticing, learning, discovering, being curious. What does this mean? How is it presenting itself? What am I? I feel you. I know you're there, body. Like those are the questions that we can begin to ask ourselves versus putting in different kinds of foods to feel that and not go to that next level. Okay.
Right, right. And most people, if you ask them about what it feels like to be doing that sort of numb, mindless eating on the couch,
Yeah.
they're not experiencing the eating. They're not experiencing anything.
No.
They're just numbing out. And so we're really trying to get through that numb, which is not that helpful,
No.
you know. So how can we actually ask yourself, like, what else do you need, body? What other components do I have that I can bring to bear? How can I be grateful for the parts of my body that I do like, or the fact that I can have this reflection, or just the breath that I can bring into my body? How can I really be in myself.
Be in myself. How can I be in myself? Um, my one other question is, so when people have allergies, people have they like certain foods and then they don't like certain foods, and we all have our preferences, right? Or
Right.
picky eaters where, so what is the line? Because it's kind of like when you're talking about disordered eating, then my mind goes to, okay, but if you have, like me, a gluten, it's not, it's a sensitivity. I can eat gluten but not with dairy. Like, now I've discovered this, so I have to be in observation of my body in order to know what is actually happening when I'm eating that particular item. It doesn't distract me or stop me from continuing to eat, but I just want to be careful, right? So where's the line, though?
Right. I think the line is, yeah, I think what you're explaining is really what you're giving voice to is this internal experience. Like, here's how I feel when I have this food, and I'd prefer not to feel that way.
Yeah, like
Or,
turkey makes me fall on the floor, exhausted.
right, so I feel like I don't want to feel that right now, so I'm not going to have that food. And that's okay,
Okay.
as long as I'm going to nourish myself in a way that makes sure I get the fuel that I need. I
Yes.
think the line is um when it's always the next thing. Like, not very many people are intolerant of this, that, the other thing, the third thing, the fifth thing, the 10th thing, the new thing, the next thing, all at the same time, right?
Right.
Not that many people are like that, but it's seeking some way to limit our food intake, like an external rule. And so I encourage people, like, figure out how you feel, like, have a food, see how you feel,
Yep.
not just when you eat it, but
Right.
the next day, because
Yes.
it takes about 24 hours from, like, eating the food to having it be done in our body,
That's
right?
right.
So it could happen over the course of that day.
Sure.
And what else is happening? It turns out that it's not actually that food, it's that I eat that food all the time with that experience. And I guess I don't really like that experience. So I wonder if I had that food some other time. Turns out that food is fine. It's the experience I don't like. Like, I don't like that. So
Right.
asking yourself questions.
Okay. That's the key. Thank you for
Yeah.
that clarification, because that, people have allergies. They can't eat eggs because,
Right.
like, and it's a very real thing. So
Right.
you're not in any way saying that. You're saying, no, eggs, we know that's a problem.
Yep.
Um, it's all the other pieces, all the other things. But what you're saying in that is, um, it's not maybe this, it's the experience. Maybe it's the
Yep.
person that's yelling at you all the time, that you're sitting there and you're like, I can't eat dinner because I feel so unsafe.
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
it's the experience you're having. It's not necessarily the food. We'd like to go to the food, and then if I just cut that food out and I don't have it, then things feel safe and in control and calm, and I know what to expect. Well, we all want to know what to expect in the world, and it's a pretty unpredictable place. So,
Would you say that the people that you're working with, the clients, the patients, that they are that one of the feelings is they don't feel safe or that they want control? Is that something that is true?
it's super interesting question. It's a side effect, which is really interesting because a lot of times people will say, "Oh, eating disorders are about control." It's usually a side effect, but it's a very powerful side effect. So if you change the way you ate or the way you exercised or you decided to do something different with your food and you felt a little bit more in control, like you felt like, "Oh, I have, I feel different."
Right.
You'd probably keep doing it, right? If it made you feel
Sure.
more in control, safer, more easy, the world was more predictable. And so it's a side effect for people who end up with an eating disorder, that it becomes and it sort of becomes part of the story. And I think that's where I love people telling their stories and hearing people's recovery stories and journeys. And I think control is this interesting piece where people are like, well, I felt really out of control in my life. And so the eating disorder started and I felt so much better. And so it was all about control. Like,
Yeah.
actually, I think maybe from what you're saying, you recognize you felt out of control for whatever reason. The world presented you with all this stuff about diet culture and you changed the way you ate and you got a lot of support for that. And you got a lot of reassurance and encouragement around that change. And so that support and reassurance and encouragement made you feel safer. And so you kept doing it because it made you feel safer. And so when you look back, it's easy to say, oh, I just needed control in my life, so the eating disorder gave me the control. Actually, it was a side effect from the reassurance and the whatever the experience you had. It the best word or the most common word we have for that is I felt more in control. And the irony to that is that people with an eating disorder, one of the primary things they don't have is control. They don't have control over being able to stop this illness. They don't have control over being able to recover. They can't just stop it or start
Right.
eating.
Right.
They are not driving. Their brain is
And
totally operating in an ill state. And so the irony of like, oh, eating disorders are just about control. Well, the eating disorder takes the control, but the human experiences something that feels good in the
wow.
process and then starts to feel really bad.
Right. And then that's that vicious cycle. Then you panic.
Yes.
Then you're
Yes.
anxious.
Yep.
And then you shame yourself. And then you're
Yep.
like, I gotta get out of it. And then you can't.
Yep. Yep. So it's really an illusion that eating disorders are all about control. It's
Yep.
just a side effect, but a potent side effect in a world that often feels out of control.
Good Lord. Okay, so this has been this has been so valuable to me. You talked about the brownie, and that was powerful to me as well because the brownie's the brownie. The brownie's not doing anything. The brownie
Right?
is there. It's got ingredients, it's made, it's fabulous. It's when you begin to shape and reshape what that brownie is supposed to mean, and someone else hears that. They take it
Exactly.
in because we're modeling.
Yep. That brownie does not sit on the counter all afternoon plotting about how to get you when you walk in the door.
Unlike cartoons.
Unlike cartoons, right?
And then we talk about this high noticing and the hypervigilance, but you use the word high noticing and then I brought up hypervigilance and you were saying, well, that's more of threat state, whereas the the high noticing is, the different effects in our body where the tags, which you and I bought a new shirt. That first thing that goes is the tag.
Cut it out. Too itchy.
It's crazy. So we talk about that. You said 6% are underweight. Other ones, we're not looking. We're not even seeing it. So just like mental illness, it's not seen. If we break a bone, oh my goodness, we're there for you. But when we've got something going on that is not seen, well, that's another world. And we don't know how to support that well. And our
Right.
tolerance might even be less. And then the most profound thing, do what you want, but be able to explain it to a community of your peers. That gives us agency. That gives us freedom. It also gives us accountability and truthfulness.
Absolutely.
And this is beautiful to me. Oh, I've learned so much.
Awesome. Well, I have too. These are so world-changing conversations. They just are
Yes.
because they're different ways to think and encourage us to keep thinking. That's the beauty of it. Absolutely.
So thank you so much.
Thanks for
Like,
having me. It's been
oh,
delightful.
well, takeaway. We got one takeaway. What could you give to people?
I would say ask yourself what you need. We have so much wisdom in our bodies, in ourselves, and we spend so much time listening to everybody else. Ask ourselves.
Yes. 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 I'm worthy. I matter. I have a place in this world. That is what we want to hear more of.
It is.
Dr. Jillian, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.